Every gym class you ever attended started the same way. Sit down, reach for your toes, hold it for 30 seconds. Touch your toes before you run. Stretch your quads before you squat. Hold a hamstring stretch before the game. This was law. Every coach taught it, every textbook endorsed it. The logic seemed bulletproof. A longer, looser muscle is less likely to tear. That logic is wrong. Not outdated, not oversimplified, empirically wrong. The largest clinical trials ever conducted on pre-exercise stretching found that it does not prevent injuries. And the biggest meta-analyses in sports science found that it makes you weaker, slower, and less powerful. What you were taught for decades was not just useless, it was actively working against you. Let me walk you through what the science actually shows. In 2000, researchers took 1,538 US Army recruits and randomly assigned half of them to stretch 6 muscle groups before every training session for 12 weeks. The other half did no stretching. After 12 weeks of brutal military conditioning, there was no difference in injury rates between the groups. The hazard ratio was 0.95, meaning stretching reduced injury risk by 5%, which is statistically meaningless. The things that actually predicted injuries were fitness level and age. Stretching predicted nothing. In 2002, the British Medical Journal published a systematic review confirming those findings. Stretching before or after exercise did not prevent injuries and did not reduce muscle soreness. The effect on soreness was less than 2 millimeters on a 100 millimeter pain scale. 2 millimeters. You cannot feel 2 millimeters. In 2004, the US Centers for Disease Control reviewed 361 studies and concluded that there's not enough evidence to recommend stretching before exercise as a method for injury prevention. That was 20 years ago. The data has only gotten stronger since then.
So why does it not work? A researcher named Ian Schreier laid out 5 reasons in a landmark 1999 paper that started the entire paradigm shift. First, when you make a muscle more compliant through stretching, it actually absorbs less energy before it tears, not more. Animal studies showed that artificially increasing tissue compliance made it easier to rupture. You are making the rubber band softer, but softer rubber bands break faster under sudden force. Second, most injuries happen within the normal range of motion, not at the extreme end. A hamstring tear during sprinting does not happen because you could not reach far enough. It happens because the muscle was contracting eccentrically, lengthening while under load, and the force exceeded the fiber's structural limit. Increasing your maximum range of motion does nothing to change the force at which fibers fail within their working range. Third, stretching before exercise raises your pain tolerance. You can stretch further and it hurts less. That sounds good until you realize it means your early warning system is dulled. A micro tear that would normally make you pull up and protect the muscle gets masked. You keep going. The micro tear becomes a macro tear. Fourth, stretching can cause microscopic damage to the muscle's internal structure, specifically the Z discs that anchor the contractile proteins. So the tissue you are about to load has already been pre-damaged by the stretch itself. Fifth, for most activities like jogging, cycling, or swimming, you never reach anywhere near your maximum range of motion. Increasing that maximum has no functional relevance for the movement you are about to do. Now, here is the part that changes what you do in the gym. Static stretching before exercise makes you weaker. This is not controversial. It is quantified to the decimal point. The definitive meta-analysis, published in 2013, analyzed 104 studies and found that holding a stretch before exercise reduces maximum strength by 5.4%. explosive power by 2%, and muscular power output by 1.9%. These effects were consistent regardless of age, sex, or training level. A professional athlete loses the same percentage as a beginner. The mechanism is neurological, and it is fascinating. When you hold a muscle in a stretched position, the sensory fibers inside it, the spindles that detect length changes, gradually desensitize. They stop sending as many signals to the spinal cord. Normally, those signals feed into a system of persistent inward currents in the dendrites of your motor neurons. These currents act like an amplifier. A small signal from your brain arrives at the motor neuron, and the persistent inward currents boost it into a high-frequency firing pattern that recruits your largest, most powerful motor units. When the spindle signals go quiet from sustained stretching, the amplifier shuts off. The motor neuron still receives the command from the brain, but without the boost, it fires at a lower frequency. You cannot recruit your high-threshold motor units as effectively. The muscle is physically capable of producing more force, but the nervous system cannot command it to. Researchers call this motor neuron dysfacilitation. Your brain is sending the same email, but the receiving end turned off the speakers. On top of the neural effect, the tendon itself becomes more compliant. Ultrasound studies show that Achilles tendon stiffness drops by nearly 12% after stretching. A softer tendon wastes energy. When the muscle contracts, instead of the force transmitting directly to the bone, it first has to stretch the now compliant tendon before any movement occurs. It is like trying to push a car with a bungee cord instead of a rigid bar. Energy leaks out at the connection point. The duration matters enormously. Stretches held for less than 45 seconds produce a trivial strength loss of about 1%. Stretches held for more than 60 seconds produce losses of 4 to 7%. The 2025 Delphi Consensus, where international experts voted on evidence-based recommendations, officially stated that stretches longer than 60 seconds must be excluded from pre-exercise protocols entirely. So what should you do instead? Dynamic stretching. Active controlled movements through a full range of motion without holding any position. Leg swings, walking lunges, arm circles, high knees. Movements that look like the exercise you are about to do, performed at a lower intensity. Dynamic stretching does the opposite of what static stretching does. It raises your muscle temperature, which reduces internal viscosity and makes tissues glide more smoothly. It increases nerve conduction velocity, which means signals from brain to muscle travel faster. It stimulates motor neuron activity instead of suppressing it. And it can trigger post-activation potentiation, a state where the muscle is primed to contract more powerfully than it could from a cold start. Meta-analyses show that dynamic warm-ups improve sprint times by about 1% and either maintain or slightly increase jump height and power output. Static stretching decreases jump height by up to 2.6%. The difference between the two approaches is roughly 3 to 4% in explosive performance, which in competitive sport is the difference between the podium and the parking lot. The most striking real-world proof comes from FIFA 11 Plus, a warm-up program developed for soccer that completely eliminated static stretching and replaced it with running, dynamic mobility, plyometrics, and balance exercises. Teams that adopted it with high compliance saw total injuries drop by 46%. Ankle injuries dropped by 35 to 48%. Non-contact injuries dropped by 71%. No stretching, fewer injuries, by a massive margin. Does this mean static stretching is useless? No. It means it is useful at the wrong time. For long-term flexibility gains, static stretching is the gold standard. Holding positions for 30 to 120 seconds, 2 to 3 sets per muscle group, done as a separate session or after training, produces genuine structural changes in the muscle tendon unit over weeks and months. The tissue adds sarcomeres in series. Range of motion increases permanently. There is even evidence that very high volume chronic stretching, 15 minutes per muscle group multiple times per week, can produce small but measurable muscle growth and strength gains through mechanotransduction, the process by which mechanical tension triggers protein synthesis pathways. This makes it a useful tool for elderly or immobilized patients who cannot lift weights. But for healthy people, the same adaptations come faster and larger from resistance training through a full range of motion. One more thing the data killed: stretching does not fix soreness. A 2025 meta-analysis of 15 trials found that post-exercise stretching had zero statistically significant effect on delayed onset muscle soreness, strength recovery, or pain threshold. The effect size was minus 0.06. That is nothing. Soreness comes from inflammation and microdamage inside the muscle fibers. Pulling on inflamed tissue does not reduce inflammation. It might make it worse. Here is your updated protocol. Before training, 5 to 10 minutes of progressive aerobic activity to raise muscle temperature, followed by dynamic stretches specific to the movements you are about to perform. No static holds. No sitting on the ground touching your toes. After training or on rest days, static stretching for flexibility if you need or want more range of motion. Hold for 30 to 120 seconds per position, 2 to 3 sets at an intensity of mild discomfort, not pain. The one exception: if your sport demands extreme flexibility at competition level, gymnastics, figure skating, martial arts, ballet, then short static stretches of 45 seconds or less can be included in the dynamic warm-up. The strength loss at that dose is about 1%, which is trivially small, and the functional benefit of achieving your required range outweighs the cost. For everyone else, the evidence is settled. The ritual you learned as a child, the one where you sit on the floor and hold your hamstrings before the game, was a 50-year mistake. It was built on intuition, not data, and the data says it made you weaker and no safer. Share this with someone who still stretches before they run. Subscribe to HELSI for more on how your body actually works. I will see you in the next one.